and we'll go ahead and get started. I suspect that our meeting won't be very long this week because I basically don't have any news from LibLine. Patrick has been away the last 2 weeks at first the Special Libraries Association meeting, and then earlier this week, the American Library Association meeting. So there's really not a whole lot new from Patrick's perspective anyway. The sandboxes have, though, been updated a couple of times since our last meeting. And what I thought I would do first is go through some of the more significant things that have been either added or changed or fixed. I do have the release notes up here as well. And to get to the release notes, just to remind you, if you scroll down on this page, you will get to the links to the various Bibliovation 6.0 documentation links. And the last one in the list is the release notes. So I'll come back here where I have them summarized and tell you about a few of them. Now keep in mind that these are only in your sandbox. They are not yet in your production version. So if you want to check out these features, you should do that in your sandbox. Okay, the first one is that reports can now be scheduled. And I'll show you how you can get to this particular area. I'm at the home page in the Waldo sandbox, and I need to first go to reports. Once I'm on the reports page, you'll see that when I click on the SQL reports to get a list of all of them, that there are some changes that you will immediately see on this page. Instead of just a list of all of the reports, etc., there's going to be a different display that will give you the author of the report, the name that was given to the report, any tags that you may have added to the report, a created date. You'll have a repeat state, which leads you to believe that there's something even more that you can do now, which is true. And there's also an action. If there is a repeat that you just want to run right now, that there's nothing that you need to edit in the SQL, or if there's nothing that you need to add in terms of dates or change in terms of dates, you can certainly just click on the run button. And by clicking on the run button, it will automatically start the report, and when it's will be notified just as usual. But because this view is a little bit different, you need to be aware that there are other differences that you can see here. And I'm going to go to the second page of the report. And I know this report runs because I've run it several times. So I wanted to show you the rest of what's going on here. In our top line on our report, we have our back to list, cancel, save, run as before, but we also have an option now to schedule. So if there is a report that you want to have run every day, you can run it every day. You can run it once at the same or at the scheduled time. And I have to get a couple of things out of the way here. And you can enter the date using the calendar and the time, and you can choose to run it once, or you can choose to run it until you tell it to stop. Okay, if you run it once, you can schedule something that, if you know it's a long report and you know it's going to take a little bit of time, you can say that you want to run it one time and then have it start like at 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. So you can have the report ready by the time you come to work the next morning. You can also choose to have it tell you that the results are that it's done. So if you want to run it at 4 a.m. and you want it to just send you the email when it's done, so you don't have to go in and check the to see if it's done, you'll see it in your email, you can click this box as well. Right now, I don't have anything scheduled here, but if I wanted to schedule this report to run on the last day of the last working day of the month, I can enter the date there, and then the time I'll put 0400. I think that's how it goes, but I'm not exactly 100% sure. So I want to show you that it's also been documented. You'll see that in the documentation section 8.1.3 talks about scheduling a report. And it says here you could use a calendar widget, which is what I did, but you must fill in the time as hours, months, seconds. So I have to go back over to my report and change it to 04 and then put in my colon. That's the minutes and then the seconds. So once I get that in there and it's correctly, I can then tell it to send me an email, and you will have to enter your email address in here. It's not going to the patron record. And at that point, you can then click on schedule. Okay, the report has been scheduled, and I'll be notified when it's complete. Tomorrow, when I start work, I'll check my email like I normally do, and I'll see that report has been delivered to my mailbox. So if you use the other option, let me go back into my schedule here. If you want it to run it repeatedly until explicitly stopped, we'll go back to our documentation and see what it says. Once we click on the radio button, we're going to get more options to fill in. So let me go back to the report. I'll click that button, and then you can see I can tell it how often in terms of years, months, weeks, and days, and at what time, in hours, minutes, and seconds. So if I wanted it to run every month, I would tell it to run every 1 month. Let me see, let me go back to the documentation. Okay, so I'm just going to rely on the documentation here. If we have our items scheduled, you can see here it's that we're going to have it run every day. If you want circulation statistics collected every day and emailed to you, and you already have a report that you have set up to do that, you can then run it every day and have the email results sent to you. Okay. And if you want to then schedule it for every day, you would then, I'm sorry, I should not have gone yet. You fill this in and you then will have it scheduled every day. If you're closed for a day, for example, the 4th of July, Independence Day is coming up soon. So you want to run it every day except that particular day, you can suspend the report. As you notice here, it has suspend, so it will skip that day, and then the next day it will run that report at a different or on a different time. Okay, so a scheduled report can be permanently deleted from the report and the edit screen though. So if you are at the edit screen and there's something suspended, you can click on the X and it will cancel it completely and it won't reappear. Okay, any questions about the scheduling? Is this something that you think that you will use? Okay, I'm going to assume that the answer to the question is yes, even though nobody has typed that in. But I think that's pretty pretty cool because.
Yeah, Becky, I think that's a terrific feature, and we'll use it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
When we have the anonymized turned on, then we'll want to have the reports run before the anonymized so that we can continue to capture both the statistics and the information about patrons who are checking out equipment that we actually don't want to anonymize. We want to retain.
Yes. And I'm going to skip to number 7 down here because there is also a new feature that has been added. It's just been added, and I haven't had time to do any really or playing around with it. But there is a new tool in the tools menu or in the tools page that will allow you to set up cron scripts. So one of the cautions that's in the release notes is don't use until you consult with the help desk to make sure that you get it set up. This one I don't believe has any help information written in it yet. Let me see if I can find it here. Yeah, right here it is. You have to have super librarian privileges in order to use this tool. So make sure that if you have staff that you don't want to use this tool, that you don't give them that permission. So that's the first thing that I know for certain. The reason that I point this out is that when you set up, when your reports run, you'll need to be aware of when your cron jobs are set up to run. So you'll need to contact the help desk to make sure that you get your report scheduled to run before the cron job runs that does the anonymize. So it's a matter of timing. It's just taking taking a step back and thinking through the process about when things want to be done. As always, I would recommend that when you are ready to start working with this, that you work with it in the sandbox before you do something in production, because this is not something that can be reverted. Okay, so that's something that will help as well. There are a few features that have been added in different areas that I wanted to make sure you knew about. And this one I don't actually know. I can't actually show it to you because I don't have any Dublin core records in the sandbox, and I am not up to date on what the crosswalks, how they're set up and added. But Dublin core marked crosswalk support has been added for exporting records. I don't think it's there for importing records right now, but you can export records in Dublin core if you need to. There are a couple of changes in the history capabilities. The checkout history has been updated in my dashboard. And let me go back over here. Okay. Since the last time I've shown you the dashboard, they've changed things around a little bit and they've added a few things. So the look of this is probably a little different. And the one thing that I probably should clean up in my patron account is the fines. But you'll notice that we have different icons that appear here now, which is kind of nice to see it. And there is an area down here where a patron can set up their general preferences. And part of it has to do with whether or not you retain hold history, and if you do, what columns you want to be displayed to yourself. There used to be another one in here about checkouts. where you could identify whether or not you wanted to retain your checkout history. Now, if you don't teach your patrons or your faculty members that they can do this, you don't need to be concerned about it. But if you do teach them, you need to be aware of this one little change. Let me go back to my checkouts. And in my checkout option, there is a place where the patron can turn off whether or not the checkout history is kept. Right now, when I click on this, you'll see that there is a checkbox here in the middle that says user setting. And the paragraph here describes pretty much what this is going to allow them to do. If they leave that box unchecked, it will not keep their history. But if they check on that box, they will keep the history. And I noticed when I was working with this earlier that when I clicked on here, it still says off here. And I think that that needs to say on after you've turned it on so that you know where you are. That I'll report as a bug. And they can tell me if I'm understanding it incorrectly, but I think that there should, because it's a toggle, you should be able to do that. But again, if you don't want your patrons to know about this, just don't tell them about it. And if you don't want this to display on this page, you'll be able to hide it with CSS in the discovery layer. Okay, and in the patron record itself, there is another tab that's been added on the patron detail page. Okay, so I'll show you my page, my patron record. And things look pretty much the same here. There's still the history button here, so you can get the history in terms of the reading record, the hold history, and the patron edit history. But on the details page, down at the very bottom, with all of our other options that we can see what's checked out, what the fines are, if there are holds, there is now another tab here that's called circulation history. And if you click on this, the circulation history here basically is the action log that is kept in the logs. And all that is kept here are check-ins and check-outs, issues and returns. So if somebody claims that they returned something on a certain date, you can verify it here. Based on the information that I see here, I don't know how helpful this is going to be. But note that in the first column, it's the staff member who did the transaction. It's not the patron's barcode. So this would take me to the patron or to the staff member's patron record who did this particular action. In the Waldo sandbox, it's pretty much the same all the time. You'll notice all of these 2000 or 20003s, that's my patron record, of course, and you'll see there's all these issues and returns. It really isn't going to tell me a whole lot since I do all the work, but when you have circulation desks that has different students that are working, you'll be able to keep track of who is doing what when if you want to. Again, I'm not certain how this is really going to be all that helpful to you. I suspect that the public libraries wanted to have this in here, especially South Central that has 50-some branch libraries. So they wanted to have a little bit better idea of how items were circulating. Okay. If you do searches of your patron records that you have, this is one that was in the release notes as an enhancement, and I guess that I haven't done that particular search all that often, but if I go back to my patrons page and do an advanced search, let's see. What it's supposed to do is to bring back the searches in alphabetical order. I think maybe it didn't do that in the past, but it very quickly brings that information back in alphabetical order. And if there is a patron last name that is repeated, like in the bells here, those should be alphabetical too, starting with the A's all the way down. And I know that that hasn't always been that way, but I thought it'd be nice to point that one out to you. Okay, and when you search by barcode, it's going to go to the item status page. So if we are in our search, let's see, search the catalog, and we search by a specific barcode, I'm going to not search by the barcode. I'm going to first search by a title so that I can get to the barcode. But if I were to search for any one of these barcodes, instead of going to, I shouldn't have to match that. But when you go to look at this, what it tells me you're supposed to do is go directly to the status page. So you're supposed to go to this page, but for this particular one, I'm not seeing it do that. So that's another thing that I will ask about, but that is another feature that's supposed to be there. And that's basically it. There was a point release that was put onto the sandbox this morning. If you look at your sandboxes in the More menu and click on About, you should see LAK 6.00.04. If you don't see that, enter a support center ticket, because you should all be seeing that 6.00.04 at this point in time. And let me flip back here one more time. And the information that Jane sent today said that the intent of this new release is to get the pieces ready so that they can be moved into production. In her message, she said in a day or two. So that's what I put on here. I suspect that I'm not sure if she'll send out a message to the Waldo support mailing list when that's done, but for those of you who have upgraded to version 6.00 point whatever, you will have that upgrade happen when that happens. So I'll ask her to let me know so I can let you all know that it's been done. And then if these features don't show up for you, then you'll need to identify those issues in a support center report. Okay, any questions about those new features and enhanced features? I did not include all of the fixes that have been done. I read through all of them and I realized that most of them, starting down here, are items that relate a lot to, one more page I think, starting here, seem to relate mostly to libraries with branches. So I didn't add them into that list of items that have been upgraded or fixed. But the fixes are always at the end of the release note, so they're pretty easy to find. I would suggest that when you have a few moments that you might want to scan through these to see if there's any that would affect your library or be something that you might want to try. Okay, just a real brief reminder that if you haven't already scheduled your upgrade to Bibliovation 6.0 to do so as soon as possible. Keep in mind that if you don't have a date scheduled, I should have taken the June dates off, but I didn't. If you are not already, if you don't get scheduled, LibLime will go ahead and schedule a date for you, and then we'll let you know. I think it's better for you to do the scheduling yourself, because then you know something is going to change. If you don't schedule your upgrade, it will happen and you'll be thrown on the following days. So make sure that you know. I didn't see any more libraries that were scheduled after WWWC, Warren County. So hopefully there have been more done. I'll double check through the support center again and find out what's going on. Since there have been 1 or 2 or 3 or more upgrades since the last time we met, I was wondering if anybody had any upgrade experiences, either in the sandbox or production, that you ran across that you think other people should know about. Just that there have been a few more support center requests that have been entered recently.
Yeah, so this time it took about a day for the upgrade to stabilize. We had a lot of things that didn't really take for a while.
I saw that, and I'm not sure why that happened, because it should not have.
Yeah, that was very unusual and disconcerting for the staff.
Definitely. And even if you know it's been changed, when it doesn't change the way you expect it to change, it's even more perplexing, especially if you have a patron in front of you.
Yeah. And of course, we did schedule it for break, so we didn't have too many patrons affected.
That's good. Has everything been running pretty good since those few things that occurred were found?
I think they're still resolving the bulk modify feature, which was intended to run in the background, but that part was broken.
Yeah, and I only try to test new things that I see coming out, and don't go back and comprehensively test everything that has been there before. So I'm sorry I didn't run into that one before you did.
Yeah, and of course it is completely redesigned.
Yes.
So one of the really odd things on that first day was that we still had the old bulk modify app show up and function briefly. So I do recommend to folks that they clear their cache and history. Normally I think that's one of those kind of generic troubleshooting things that people say but really don't make any difference. But
yeah.
In this case, I just have to assume that the old code was somehow in the browser and actually managed to run the feature against the database.
I know Jane has said before that she's found that sometimes she has to reload her browser multiple times before it takes, which I've never understood, and I've never run into it myself. Usually I just forget to clear cache and reload the browser, but she says that it's not infallible. It does sometimes not work.
Yeah.
So I guess that your advice for everyone is very sound, that if it doesn't seem to be working quite right, reload your browser again. Try and clear it out until it gets the new code.
Yeah. Our circulation supervisor is still having issues with the scanner, not necessarily taking when she scans a patron barcode into checkout. I'm still trying to work with her and with support to get that resolved.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of odd. That's an odd problem to show up.
Yeah, and they don't have a scanner at LibLines, so they're not going to be able to reproduce the problem if the problem is the way the scanner scans into the box.
Mm-hmm. I know a few times I've had to look at the console log, the JavaScript console log to see different things, and I know, and I've copied it and sent it to LibLines. I'm not exactly certain what that tells them, but it definitely sounds like a timing issue, that something isn't waiting long enough or waits too long to find the character that it's expecting.
Yeah, it scans in and highlights the box, but then they have to press enter to get it to take, and they didn't have to do that before. So I don't know.
Expecting the auto send at the end of the string.
Yeah, and when they scanned it into a notepad, it does put the barcodes on a different line. So I'm assuming that it's actually getting the paragraph, the carriage return in there. So I don't know what's going on.
And since I don't have a scanner, I can't test it here either. So
yeah, and so at LibLine they say, well, they cut and pasted in and it worked just fine, but of course it would. if you have to hit enter in order to get it to take, and they hit enter, then yeah.
That's not your normal your normal procedure when you're at a circulation counter. You scan it, and then you scan another one, and then you scan another one, assuming that the return is happening each time.
Yeah, I mean, normally what they do is they scan the patron barcode, and then they scan the items to be checked out. It just automatically goes from one box to another. I'm assuming that since they haven't told me anything otherwise, that when they're just checking things in, it is taking that just fine.
That's really odd.
Yeah.
Well, if I think of anything, I'll let you know, Stephen. But other than the timing and the maybe you need to have a second pause before the carriage return is added at the end of the barcode when it's scanned into.
Yeah, and so we're going to need to figure out who can program the scanners. They're kind of old, so.
Okay, well, good luck with that.
Thanks.
Okay, is there anything else that anyone wants to bring up about in terms of either upgrading or anything else? Okay, if not, we're done for today. I'll get the recording on YouTube as soon as I can, and I'll update the chart below down here with all of the YouTube things so that you'll be able to check back if you forgot something. Thank you all. We'll meet again in 2 weeks. July 11th is the date. So we'll meet then. Thank you all.